Hello, everyone. All right, so we're going to read chapter 18 today called Lake Tele. So I think they get to the lake. In the last chapter, not much happened. Marty and Grace were just eating breakfast in the jungle on their way to the treehouse where Wolf and Dr. Lee are going to pick them up. And they found Bo, the monkey who they were looking for because they had lost her. So they found Bo, and now all of them are on the way there. Okay, chapter 18. Marty woke the following morning with only the vaguest recollection of Wolf's call the previous night and the sorest muscles he'd ever experienced. I hurt in places I didn't know were places, he thought, looking over at Grace, who was asleep in her hammock with PD snuggled up next to her. Now, what was it Wolf told me last night? He dug the gizmo out of his backpack. There was no word from his uncle, but there were a couple of emails from Luther. Subject: the Big Cow Expedition, from Luther to Marty. Hey, O'Hara, you and your sister may think that you're having the adventure of your lives, but I've got news for you. You missed the big one. That's right, Teeter's Dairy Farm. I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but we were actually able to see cows being milked by a machine. And, hang on to your seat, we actually touched real dairy cows. I swear it's true. Aren't you sorry you got dumped into the Congo now? The only negative on the trip was that all of the guys, including me, were frisked for cows before we left. Guess who started this tradition? Attached is a photo of our old roommate, Bill, your co-wrestler, Luther. Marty opened the image and laughed. The digital photo was of a good-sized Jersey bull. He was surprised at how much Bill had grown during the past year, but there was no mistaking him. There was a small notch in his right ear, which he had gotten when Luther mistakenly slammed it into their dormitory door. The boys had stolen Bill from Teeter's Dairy the previous year when they learned he was destined for the slaughterhouse, and they managed to keep him hidden in their tiny room for nearly 2 months. Wow. For the first time since they had left, Marty actually felt himself missing school, or at least Luther anyway. He opened his friend's second email. Subject: where are you? From Luther to Marty. Marty, I thought you said the gizmo thing worked anywhere in the world. Where are you? Mars? Did your battery go dead? Luther. Okay, I'm starting to think that there's like a time jump here because Marty's having a hard time remembering. Is there some sort of weird time jump? Marty tapped out a sweaty response with the stylus. I'm here. Marty to Luther. Luther, the gizmo battery did not go dead. We have plenty of spares. It was my battery that went dead. I've been so tired I haven't had the energy to even read my email. In fact, I was so sore this morning it took me about an hour to get the gizmo out of my backpack, which weighs about 600 pounds. Oh, okay. It's just Marty being tired. I spent all day yesterday hacking down spider-infested brush with a dull machete in melting heat and a tornado of biting insects following me. In the evening, I found a place where there weren't too many venomous snakes, set up camp, blew out the bugs that had lodged in my nose, picked off my leeches, 27 of them, ate, slept barely, and now we're about to go through it all over again. Don't you wish you were here? But enough of my whining. On the bright side, we've seen hundreds of animals. Nothing as exotic as dairy cows, of course. Here's a partial list. Elephants, chimpanzees, the wild variety. Leopard, just one sleeping in a tree with a dead duker still dripping blood. Gorilla, I think. It ran off and we only got a glimpse of its back. Bats, birds, rock python. Well, you get the picture. Speaking of which, I've attached a couple of digital photos I snapped with the gizmo. The images are a little blurry, but you'll be able to make out what they are if you squint your eyes and use your imagination. Anyway, I'd better send this off and get moving. The oven is already starting to heat up and it's just after dawn. Marty. After he sent the email, he tried to reach Wolf on the gizmo, but there was no answer. Marty wished he could remember what Wolf had told him the night before. Any word from Wolf or Laurel? Grace asked from her hammock. Not really, Marty answered. What do you mean by that? He called last night, but I didn't catch everything he said. Something about a Molimo and a guy named Butch McCall. Did he say what the Molimo was? I can't remember. Who's Butch McCall? Butch McCall. I don't know. So remember, Butch is the guy who is one of who works for Noah Blackwood, and it sounds like he might be out in the Congo looking for them. Butch McCall was not in a good mood. Oh, so now we're switching to his perspective. Their first night at Lake Tele, a silverback gorilla had taken a shortcut through his camp. Normally, this would not have been a problem, but at the same moment the gorilla was ambling through, one of his men got up to relieve himself. The gorilla and the man collided, which caused the gorilla to go berserk. He slammed the man against a tree, then began to systematically take their camp apart. Order was restored with the blast of a shotgun, but not before the guerrilla had destroyed most of their food and a good deal of the equipment Butch and his 3 men had hauled into Lake Tele on their backs. The man who had collided with the guerrilla had been moaning for 3 days and was still moaning as Butch watched from what was left of his shelter. He was tempted to put the man out of his misery, not because he was sympathetic to the man's pain. Butch was simply tired of listening to him. The 2 remaining men were standing at the fire cooking a couple of roasts from the gorilla's thighs, jabbering away in French. Butch had supervised the skinning. The silverback would be a nice addition to Blackwood's gorilla diorama, and perhaps make up for the fact that after 3 days at Lake Tele, Butch had made absolutely no progress contacting the pygmy named Masalito. Oh, that's right. Butch is there trying to find Masalito because they want to get a hold of the dinosaur egg or something. The satellite phone rang. Butch swore. There was only one person in the world who had the number. "Good morning, Dr. Blackwood," Butch answered. "Morning, Butch. How goes the hunt?" "We haven't found him yet." Butch's answer was met with a chilling silence. "He's around, though," he continued. "We've seen plenty of signs. I'm sure he'll show himself soon. It's just a matter of time." "That's one thing we don't have, Butch. Wolf and that woman landed in the Congo 2 days ago and are headed your way." "I can handle Wolf," Butch assured him. "I don't want you to handle Wolf. I want you to get me an egg or the beast itself. And I want you long gone before they arrive. We've been over this a dozen times. I realize you have a vendetta against Wolf. So do I. But he knows more about the animals we need than anyone on Earth. If we lose him, we lose the trail. I won't allow that to happen." "I understand." There's only one thing in the world that Butch was afraid of, and that was the man on the other end of the line. We did manage to bag a silverback a few days ago. "You're out hunting gorillas?" Blackwood shouted. "I can breed as many gorillas as I need. I want you—" "We weren't exactly hunting," Butch interrupted, then explained the circumstances. "I'm sorry, Butch," Blackwood said, regaining his composure. "I didn't mean to be short with you. It's just that this is critical. If Wolf gets there, he'll block our chances of bagging Mokalamembe. I feel bad sending you out in the field so quickly after you've brought back our 3 black and white friends, which are thriving, by the way. Those are the baby pandas, I'm assuming. I'll tell you what I'll do. If you bring me a viable egg, I'll give you a bonus of 10,000 shares of ARK stock. If you capture the beast, I'll give you 30,000 shares." The morning had just taken a turn for the better. Butch smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. ARK stock was as good as money in the bank. "You'll get your egg, and if there's an egg, there's an animal. Find it for me, Butch." After Blackwood cut the connection, he mulled over his stormy history with the Wolf family. Travis was very much like his father. Smart, proud, stubborn, competitive, with incredible drive and fortitude. So remember, Travis is the Uncle Wolf. But there was one thing he had not inherited from his father. Travis could not pull the trigger at the end of a hunt. A pity, Noah thought, because he had never seen a man more dedicated to the chase than Travis Wolf. When he was just a teenager, Travis had found an ivory-billed woodpecker in a Louisiana swamp, a bird last seen in 1944. During his sophomore break from veterinary school, he discovered a pink-headed duck in the jungles of Burma. During his junior break, he found a pride of Atlas lions in northern Africa. Since graduating from veterinary school, Travis had personally discovered 5 primate species previously unknown to science. In all these cases, he refused to take any credit, going so far as to insist to governing authorities that his name be kept out of announcements of the discoveries. But Travis has not reported all of his discoveries, Noah thought. The important ones he keeps all to himself, like his most recent, the active den of a Yeren or Sasquatch at the Shenangjia National Park in central China. Blackwood was about to mount an expedition to the same area himself, but Wolf had beat him to it again. Fortunately, Travis's expedition had been interrupted by the helicopter crash in Brazil. If that hadn't happened, Travis might have found the beast himself. Noah's contact on Cryptos said that Travis was resuming the Yaren search as soon as he had the funding. When this happened, Noah planned to be close behind, or perhaps a few steps ahead. After the great white shark, Blackwood had tried everything he could to get Travis to join his team. But Travis refused all of his offers. Noah thought he had finally met a man who could not be bought. But this turned out not to be true. Travis refused because he was after a much bigger prize, a prize Travis ultimately lost, for which Noah would never forgive him. That's probably the girl that they mentioned earlier. After another long, grueling morning of stumbling, sloshing, and hacking, the twins finally reached the shore of Lake Tele. Are you sure this is the lake? Grace asked. Marty nodded. Unfortunately, the sky house is way over on the other side. He gazed along the brushy shoreline, wondering how many more leeches, bugs, snakes, and thorns he was in for. Why is it that everything in this country either bites or jabs you? I don't know. Grace looked across the large lake while she massaged her aching shoulder. Throughout the morning, she had spelled Marty on the machete, discovering that her willingness was much stronger than her arm. It's so boring, Marty said. The famous Lake Tele was nothing more than a shallow, smelly lake with clouds of bugs hovering over it. He hadn't expected to see dinosaurs munching grass along shore, but he had expected something a little bit more dramatic than what he was looking at. He picked up a rock and skimmed it across the glassy surface. 5 skips. 3, Grace corrected, but Marty didn't seem to hear her. He was staring wide-eyed at something across the lake. He grabbed Grace's arm and pulled her to the ground. What are you doing? Can't you see it? He pointed to the far shore with a shaking finger. No. Mokulamembe, Marty hissed. Get the binoculars. Oh wow, so they see it, the dinosaur. Grace dug them out of his pack and focused on the place he was pointing. All she saw was a tree that had fallen into the lake with a single moss-covered branch sticking out of the water, which might be mistaken for a sauropod if you had a wild imagination like her brothers. Do you see it? Marty whispered excitedly. Yes, Grace said. Amazing. I told you there were living dinosaurs. You sure did. A real Loch Ness monster. It's called the Loch Ness Monster, you dunce. Marty grabbed the binoculars. And the Loch Ness Monster, he continued as he put them to his eyes, is thought to be a plesiosaur, not a sauropod like Mokulamembe. Oh, geez. I knew that, Grace said, and began laughing harder than she had when she had scared Marty in the library backed on Kryptos. That's not funny, Marty said. Okay, so it turns out it was just a log. All right, back to Butch McCall. Butch McCall was squatting behind a tree, not 100 feet from where the twins were. After breakfast, he had sent his 2 remaining men out individually, thinking that Masalito would be more likely to approach a single man than a group. The day before, they had found the warm ashes of a fire and a pile of bird bones left over from a meal, which Butch was convinced belonged to Masalito. No one else lived near Lake Tele. He's watching us, Butch told the men. We've got to draw him out. I want you to walk in a straight line for 3 hours, then come back along a different route. If he makes eye contact, invite him back to camp. If he resists, hog tie him and drag him back to camp. After the men left, Butch headed towards Lake Tele with the intention of walking all the way around it. But his stomach put an end to the circumnavigation. The silverback was taking his final revenge inside Butch's small intestine, which was why he was squatting behind the tree. At first, he thought Grace's laughter was the call of a bird he wasn't familiar with, a rare bird perhaps, a bird Noah Blackwood might pay good money for. He quickly pulled his pants up and crawled forward. It wasn't a bird, it was a boy. He was standing next to the shore, pointing at a large snag sticking out of the water on the other side of the lake. And next to him was another kid rolling on the ground laughing. Butch was flabbergasted. He couldn't see the face of the youngster on the ground because of the mosquito hat. But by the sound of the laugh, it was a girl. What were they doing out in the middle of the Congo? He was about to find out when he heard the boy say, well, it could have been Mokulamembe. Watch and wait, Butch thought. They can't possibly be out here on their own. He followed the 2 children, expecting them to lead him to their camp or their parents. But there was no camp and no adults, just a boy and a girl slicing their way along the soggy shoreline. Hour after hour until they arrived at the opposite side of the lake. Oh no, all right, well, we'll see what happens next. Bye.